After d4, d5, c4, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, and knight f3, we play in the Chigorin in the 4 knights game. Okay, so now we play bishop g4 as mentioned in some of the previous videos. We're going to look at something that we haven't seen so far at all. Bishop to g5 now. What's the move? Knight to e4. And now there's an attack on that bishop. So now there's a few options. So I start from the blunder. Knight to d5. Looks like he wins a pawn, but now you just take this bishop. And that's it, you're up a piece. White has no counterplay. Looks like white can take back, but now e6. You're going to attack on this knight and then attack on the other knight with the queen and with the pawn. So you're going to win a piece. There's no counterattack here or anything. Let's say, for example, f3 attacking our bishop. First thing is take this knight. And now you're up a piece. If white takes you, then you take the knight, you're up a piece. If white takes you with the pawn, looks like there's going to be an attack on this knight, but simply takes this pawn in d5, and the attack on the knight remains. Although you might argue that our opponent is also attacking our knight, so what happens if the knight goes to e4, getting safe? Well, then we save our bishop too. We're winning this game easily. So let's go from the beginning. So that's the 4 knights game with bishop g4, and now bishop g5. Knight e4. What happens when the knight takes our knight straight away? Okay, we take back obviously, and now knight d2 is not possible because simply queen to d4, you're going to attack on d2. I mean b2, then you also have knight to b4 with an idea of going to c2. It's devastating. There's absolutely no counterplay, you're also up material. So in this position, after the pawn takes back, what happens when the knight goes to h4? Okay, well, e5 comes now. And we have triple attack over the pawn in d4, we're going to take it. We also have an attack on the bishop. So we are winning material here. Unless our opponent takes our queen, right? But obviously we play bishop before, there is no other way to save the white king than to give us the queen. So bishop takes, king takes, and now rook to d8. Again, we have triple attack on this pawn and we're going to take it. e3 doesn't make sense because it would be only one defender, we have 3 attackers. So what happens after d5? You leave it there because the pawn is pinned, and black plays g5, attacking the knight and trapping the knight. So what happens if white plays h? They counter-attacking. Okay, bishops to c8. This is the best move. And now the knight remains trapped. Now you might argue what happens after f3. Can the white player find no counterplay? No. Again, bishop to c2, c8. And now white can't move his knight once again. He might have like 3 pawns here. He might have like a stronger center, but still, you're completely winning. You're up a piece with no compensation. And you carry on to the winning endgame. So let's take it from the start and look at the more serious move. Serious meaning that our opponent will have to be a strong player to make sure play as accurate as possible in a variation where he's supposed to lose. So knight to e4, knight takes, pawn takes. What happens when the knight goes to e5? This will purposely allow us to take and double up the pawns, but it is a line and it's the best thing that white can do actually. Now here we swap everything, queen takes, rook takes, and now bishop back to d7. So e3 developing, e6, and now we have a threat of a very, very strong move, bishop e4. So after a3, h6 attacking the bishop, bishop h4, and now a5. The idea is to play a4 and make this pawn unable to move, and the pawn in a4 is protected by the bishop, which is why we play bishop d7, and it's there to stay. Very advanced pawn. Bishop to e2, a4, castle, bishop to c5. And now white can never push the f-pawn because then we will be taking this one. So after rook d2, let's see this plan about doubling up the rooks. Okay, bishop to c6, rook f to d1, g5. Forcing, all of these moves are forced if you notice. Bishop g3, castle. And there's not much to do. It's kind of a zugzwang type of situation. Eventually, you might even think of swapping rooks, but the first thing first, you gotta advance a king and play the f-pawn. So let's see, h3 for instance, king g7. Now the best move by white will be king f1. The position is only slightly better for black. It's like minus 150 or something, so it is better for black. But this is white having played the most solid computer moves only all the way up to move 20. So that's not going to happen in your game, remember. And especially you know the pattern, so at some point you are going to destroy the player that is in front of you playing because they're not going to play like a computer for over 20 moves. And since you know the patterns, you're supposed to destroy them before the endgame even arrives. So now black plays bishop to e7 after king f1, bishop e7, and after f3. How do we respond to this idea of the white player to finally get some space and start breathing? Okay, back to bishop c5, attacking the weak pawn, threatening the deadly bishop e3. So after bishop goes back to f2. Also, we have an idea of playing f6, taking this pawn, and then play rook f6, rook f8, and doubling up on this file. Bishop f2. Here you play f5. And you're just gonna open the files. That's it. If white takes, okay, rook takes. Best move by white now will be rook d8, but now take, and now take. Rook f7. Black is more active in this endgame. With bishop pair for both of us, but our pawns are more advanced. As soon as everything starts to clear, we should have the upper hand. King to g2, unpinning. Also because we're threatening bishop g2 and bishop f3, and we couldn't do it before due to the check. It was going to be dangerous and we will lose the pawn in c7. We don't want that, so after king to g2 anyway, e5. And we're going to drop the line here. This is a better endgame for black. I mean, we got to almost move 30. There's no much. White can't push this pawn without being taken. Can't move this bishop without, the double attack on f3. Can't push this pawn because after swapping, then this pawn will be free. And can't really do anything with the rook. This pawn in b7 and pawn in a4 are protected. There's nothing to do here. f4 gets taken, so e4 for instance, okay, swap. And now you're winning this pawn. So from the start, we got the 4 knights, bishop g4, bishop g5. Okay, knight e4. We didn't see pawn takes d5, which looks the most solid, looks the best. But still, now we're taking c3. We're attacking the queen, so white doesn't have any visions or anything. It has to take down knight immediately. And now we take this pawn with an attack on the bishop, meaning that we are threatening to take this knight, which is the defender of the bishop, and then take the bishop for free. White goes back to f4, and now long castle. So do you see how we are already winning here, which is an excellent position for black to play. Look how smooth the development is. Black is better developed than white. e3 to allow the light square bishop out. e5, immediately attacking the bishop. Now, it's not recommendable for white to play c4, attacking the queen immediately, because there's an attack on a loose piece. So you can play something like queen a5 check, and whatever white does to block it or stop it or move the king or whatever, you can then take the free bishop. The bishop is unable to block. So obviously that's a mistake. Okay, bishop g3, saving the bishop from the pawn, and now we take here. And how is white going to take? If he takes with the c pawn, that's a suicide. The knight was pinned, by the way. Here you have bishop b4. White will be forced to play king e2. So let's make an example. This is a suicide. Bishop b4, king e2. That's it. Queen c4. Checkmate is coming. Queen blocks. The knight is now properly pinned. It's not just pinned like before. It's absolute pin. So that means you can play knight check. The knight can't move, the queen can't move, they're all pinned. Pawn blocks. Pawn takes the knight. And now rook checkmate. It's not checkmate yet, but obviously the king will have to move here, and then this is checkmate. So in this position, c takes is really terrible. So what happens after e takes? Okay, now we play the stunning bishop to b4. Haha. This cannot be avoided. You see, for example, if pawn takes bishop, rook h to e8 check, all the black pieces are playing. White blocks, and now bishop takes. And obviously we're threatening rook e2. The only way to take back would be g takes. And now knight takes d4, capitalizing on this bishop. It's game over, completely over. Position maybe evaluated -10 or something like that. So in this position, after bishop b4, as mentioned, taking leads to a terrible situation. If white develops and plays queen to d3, for instance, queen to b3 is not possible because you can swap everything and bishop c3 wins the game. Queen to d3 here seems to be saving everything, but instead, look, knight takes d4. Boom! It's an incredible move. This pawn is pinned. The queen shouldn't be taking, obviously, because once you move the queen with check, then the rook can take So when the knight takes, okay, queen check, boom, even more. This is beautiful. Giving up completely the queen, because if queen takes and bishop c3 is checkmate, and don't you dare not glorifying the bishop pair the way it deserves to be glorified. So here after queen e4 check, the queen cannot take, bishop e2 still doesn't help, queen takes the queen, bishop takes with check, king to f1 only move, bishop takes rook, still remaining an attack on the knight. When the knight moves, we're going to attack on the bishop. It's a bloodbath. The last line we're going to look at is the one where the bishop goes immediately to f4. So we got the 4 knights, bishop g5, knight e5, and now the bishop simply going back to f4. Okay, e6 comes now. And we're gonna carry on with a completely normal and boring game. Let's look at this variation. Queen to b3 is an idea we haven't looked at. Is a pressure on b7, exploiting the fact that we have early developed the light square bishop, so now there's weakness in b7. How do we deal with this? It's very important to know as a Chigorin player. Bishop to b4 is a move that comes anyway. Bishop giving away from this knight is one of the thematic moves, and you don't have to worry about this attack on b7 because by then you'll be castled. Let's see, e3 developing, preparing the development of the light square bishop, g5. This is a thematic move. Bishop to g3, a5. a3, for example, now it's too late for white to play a3. Black plays a4, and the queen can't take the bishop because there's a defense and there's not enough queen for 2 pieces. Obviously, the queen will have to move to the only square where she keeps defending the double attacked knight in c3. However, take. So that was going to happen. And now bishop to f5. The idea is to play knight g3 and win the game. So queen to b2 now, putting pressure on this pawn once again. Black plays knight to a5, so this is the thematic move you play to stop the queen from putting an attack on that square. And you don't have to worry anymore. Bishop d3 loses. Remember this tactic of the bishop in f5. Knight g3, he attacks the bishop and the rook, and also defends the bishop in f5. So that's not possible. Instead, bishop developing to e2. Okay, castle. And now take the pawn in c4. That's free, because the knight is defending it. There's no way to take it back. Unless white plays knight to e5, putting attack on that square. Okay, knight to b3, attacking the rook. Rook moving to d1, obviously because knight was threatening. Knight to d2, so rook b1 doesn't work. Knight d2 attacks rook and rook. However, black now plays f6, and that traps the knight. Well, it doesn't trap the knight, because the knight can go to f5, but you also have h5 ideas. Anyway, knight to c4, looks like we lost the pawn. But now b5, and that really traps the knight. The knight will have nowhere to go except knight d2. And here you take. Knight takes, rook takes, knight takes, queen takes. And now you're up the exchange. And this is the white, having played the best moves, still going to a losing endgame. Queen to e7 is the next move, attacking the pawn in a3. And after queen to b2, rook a to b8. Proper computer move, pinning your own pawn here. After rook to d1, potentially pushing e4, bishop to e4 will do the job. You see, because f3 and then bishop d5, e4 looks like white is coming with an avalanche of pawns, but you don't have to worry, because then you just play bishop e3. You're always going to be guarding d5. Okay, so let's say rook to d1, d2, and maybe let's say bishop, maybe swapping for this tremendous bishop. Okay, just play rook to f7 now, and after bishop to d1, feel free to swap it. Rook takes, and now it looks like e4 is really going to happen. And you can't really play c6 because you lose the rook. Okay, just play rook to d8, and after d5, I don't know why I called it e4 all this time. It's actually d5. Doesn't work because after take, you also have a queen going to c5, and then that's check, and you can double the attack on the d5, and that wins the pawn. If instead, well, queen takes b5 is bad, because then you will take in a3. This is a passed pawn. It's a very dangerous passed pawn. And last but not least, if c4, you just take the pawn. Yeah, this is doubled up and isolated, but it's fine. Even when white takes back, you're going to be doing just fine, because there's always pressure on a3. If white is not going to attack this, I mean, white can attack that pawn with the rook, but then you can double up on this square. So from the start, the very last thing I'm going to show before closing this video, is what happens after. Okay, so bishop g5 and knight e4. Bishop goes back to f4, and now e6. So we looked at the variation queen to b3, and we mentioned that the pressure on this square b7 is met with bishop e4. What happens when white attacks the bishop immediately? Okay, take the knight, check, pawn takes back, and now castle. So after castle and queen takes in b7, we're down a pawn. However, we're going to play knight a5 with an attack on the queen, and we're also going to go to the square c4. So when the queen moves, you just take the pawn in c4. So that was a poison pawn, because what's white going to do now? The queen is kind of stuck. White is down with development e3 with an attack on the knight. Doesn't work, you just play rook b8. The queen will have to move. Let's say queen a6, putting pressure on this pawn. Okay, rook to b8, and this is already tremendous pressure on the square f2. White is going to pay real hard the fact that the development was left out. Now you might argue that white can just at this point take this knight, and after take back just castle and be safe. But remember that we have an attack on this knight, for instance, in f3, so you're going to take, and now knight to d2 is the best move. Defends this pawn, attacks this rook, and also threatens the square f3.